Tormenta. A frigid storm from the north is dumping rain over the Bay Area. Through my kitchen window, green leaves and ripe lemons gleam with raindrops, making my wet garden look deceptively tropical. It's winter, though, and cold for San Francisco. It's summer in Argentina, where Pablo is, and the rainstorms are torrid and steamy tormentas, wild with thunder and lightning. A few weeks ago, we were walking through the warm Buenos Aires rain to the apartment I'd rented, talking about tormentas and other words that were better in Spanish. I failed to come up with any English words that surpassed the grace of their Spanish counterparts. I had to agree that caballo better reflected the majesty of a horse, luna llena, the enchantment of a full moon, and estrellas, the splendor of stars. Pablo walked on the outside so benditos on motorbikes wouldn't steal my purse. He taught me the words to describe the electric storm. Relámpago was the lightning that flashed, and then there was rayo, streak lightning, and trueno, the sound that followed. When we arrived at the apartment, I cranked up the air conditioning while he turned on the radio. We helped each other out of our wet clothes and made love in front of the mirror to the sounds of the blues station and the pounding rain outside. He had taught me a few words that excited him, but I found it just as hot to whisper other words in his ear. Cuchillo, cuchara, tenedor, knife, spoon, fork. We didn't discuss the future because, after all, this was only an extended vacation. If it were real life, we would have to admit that this relationship was untenable for reasons other than geography. We would have to face certain facts. His marriage and children, for example. It wasn't that he neglected to tell me about them. He flat out lied when I asked if he was married. He tried to gradually ease his way out of the lie by saying he was separado from his wife. He said he'd explain the situation over dinner, but the explanation turned out to be simply, I'm married, that's all. He wasn't even separado. He said it was too difficult to explain the situation in the club. No es difícil, I replied. Instead of no, you respond sí when I ask if you're married. He said the situation was complicado, and it didn't seem so bad to him to be with me for a while. I used the translation app on my phone to understand that he was asking if I was annoyed with him. I looked up the word for judge, so I could tell him that I wasn't judging him. It seems to me that if you're with someone you can't have, you'll be less satisfied with your own life afterwards, I said. On the bus, he told me how the girls in Buenos Aires are very sexually free. In a club, they'll pull you into the baños and have sex right there. Huddled down in the plush purple and gray seats, we talked about the places más locos where we'd had sex. In the street, in a church, in empty houses, in the supermarket, in the vision center. Never on the autobus, he said, raising his eyebrows suggestively. Well, this bus has only vino and flan, I said, pouring from the bottle of Malbec we bought on the way to the station. No sexo. Then I want to change buses, he replied, between bites of flan that I fed him with a miniature spoon. But later, when we had the dark back of the bus to ourselves, we added another place to our lists. We were returning from the Basilica at Lujan, where the light from stained glass windows shone on mangy stray dogs lying in front of the altars. Pablo had asked the priest to bless a bottle of holy water and then gave it to me, explaining that people put the water on their foreheads or sprinkled it around the house for healing or protection. I reminded him that to me it was just superstition, but I accepted his gift of God's protection, wondering why he thought I needed it. At first, danger came in titillating forms: gypsies on the bus, catcalls from men on the street, warnings not to wear my watch or use my phone in public, the endless vigilance to avoid being ripped off by taxi drivers. It was a kind of game. 2 weeks after the Lujan trip, my American friend Susan and I were walking in Buenos Aires to meet some local friends for drinks in Palermo, Hollywood. We passed trendy sidewalk cafes and turned onto Honduras Street to cross the train tracks. It was early, not yet 11 p.m., and the nearby clubs weren't open yet. We stopped when the railroad crossing gate came down with its flashing lights and chimes warning of an oncoming train. The train never came. I heard Susan scream before I saw the man grab her. I yelled, "Let her go," and leapt to try to help her, but a second guy grabbed me from behind. He pinned my arms and tugged at the wallet strapped around my wrist. I screamed as he pulled me toward the bushes. I was vaguely aware that there were cars slowing down where Honduras Street crossed the tracks. I hoped that if we kept screaming, someone would do something. The man shoved me to the ground, and I saw him, briefly, young, thick-necked, intense dark eyes, right before he punched me in the face. The next thing I remembered was the sound of yelling, then dark figures running, our attackers fleeing, shots being fired. I sat up and saw a police car parked by the tracks. Susan was covered with abrasions from broken glass on the ground, and she was worried that the ground smelled like urine. I told her I'd heard urine was sterile, and complimented her effective blood-curdling horror movie screams. I called our friends to pick us up and then left a message for Pablo in unintelligible Spanglish. He was waiting outside when we got to the apartment. He held me on his lap while I iced my face in the bleeding corner of my mouth and explained what had happened, relying on my Argentinian friend to translate when my Spanish failed. When he left for his night job as a security guard, he pleaded, "Stay in tonight, okay?" Susan and I stayed up talking until 5 in the morning and then attempted to get a little sleep before her flight home. I lay in the dark with the bedroom door cracked open, my heart still beating too fast. I tried not to let my mind fix on the image of dark figures running in the night and focused instead on thoughts of Pablo. He was coming over after work so we could spend my last night in Buenos Aires together. I was glad I wouldn't be alone, despite my misgivings after he admitted he was married. When he rang the doorbell at midnight, I ran downstairs to greet him in bare feet and a dress. He shook his head as he looked me over, brushing my hair back and inspecting my face for remnants of the mugging. He made himself a supper of leftover manchego cheese and serrano ham while I poured them all back. Between sips of wine and kisses, he started to say something, stopping himself with, "No," before continuing to ask, "And what if I weren't married?" "Let's not ask ourselves hypothetical questions," I said as well as I could in Spanish, knowing that was a lame thing to say. "You have your family, I have my life in California." He nodded in resignation. "And after I'm back in San Francisco, I'll think of you with love and wish everything good for you and your family." I emphasized the word family. "I'll think of you until the last day of my life," he replied. He led me to the sofa where he gently pulled off my dress, and I suppose it was a combination of tender sex and the mugging that prompted me to tell him I loved him. "See?" He stopped and looked into my eyes. "Te amo también." So then we both said it, willing to be reckless because I was leaving and there would be no consequences. Afterwards, we pulled up MySpace on my laptop to share our favorite bands with each other. He asked what I was doing outside Club Niceto the night we met when I was bumbling around, apologizing to the bouncer for my bad Spanish. I explained that I was looking for places to go out with my friends. "And what were you doing? Were you trying to pick up a woman?" He admitted that he was. That pissed me off. I had naively hoped that serendipity and my charm had brought us together, not a premeditated plan to cheat on his wife. "But why?" I asked. "You said you weren't going to judge me," he reminded me. We passed the next morning at the zoo, teaching each other the names of the animals. "Te quiero," he told me outside the condor cage. I asked if he told all the girls he loved them. I was sullen and remembered that he'd once borrowed 50 pesos, about $12, and never paid me back. I'm sure he knew the amount was nothing to me. I had lied when I said I wasn't judging him. I told myself to stop making this thing into more than it was, that it was better to know the truth. He was just a player looking to pick up a turista. In my head, I heard Jack Nicholson accusing, "You can't handle the truth." Pablo insisted on going with me to the airport, even though I told him Americans just let each other off at the curb. When it was time to go to the gate, I steeled my face for a quick kiss goodbye. And after I went through the first security checkpoint, he called my name, and when I turned around, tears were streaming down both of our faces. We kissed again across the ropes that separated us, making the security agents glower. I got a string of fiery emails from him the days after I returned. "You told me you loved me. Did you mean it? Tell me now. The danger is that I'll miss you too much. If you loved me, why didn't you ask me to go with you?" I think of his deep voice, of his lips kissing the corner of my mouth that was cut in the mugging, of him carrying me into the bedroom as if I were a doll. Muñeca, doll, is what he liked to call me. Bored at his job, he emails about the hot dreams he has of us. He says he's having trouble with his wife, says they're separated, and I have no idea what that really means. I daydream about Buenos Aires with its sultry sexuality. I miss the adventure that every interaction becomes in a foreign language, the sense of being fully alive. I recall my own warning about wanting what you don't have. Outside, the rain falls steadily, no mad torrential downpour, no thunder and lightning, only cold, ordinary, and unrelenting.